Preseason is the best time to boost up your MMR and get it primed and ready for the new season. There are tons of abusable champions that you can play and just win way more than normal and get on that choo-choo win streak hype train to get straight to the rank that you've always wanted. The bragging rights might not be quite as sweet as achieving it inside the rank split, but it will help you much more than you may think by the time the season starts. With the new season came the hidden names in Champion Select in solo queue, so we've adjusted our client so it now shows you what tier your teammates' champions are in and their win rates to go along with it. We also give you suggestions on counter picks based on stats for the enemy champions as they lock in. Download our app and check it out for yourself. So without further ado, let's talk about the best champions you can play in every role so far this preseason. In the top lane first and foremost, which is arguably where most of the broken champions currently lie, with bruisers popping off in every single game. Therefore, our first champion of the day is going to be the queen of the bruisers, FIORA.
I long for a worthy opponent.
With FIORA, it's all about getting a lead, keeping it and controlling it. You become so scary when you win the early game, and with just a few kills under your belt, you can outduel your enemy in that top lane whenever you see them. If you do have the control of that top lane, your influence on the game is already going to be really significant, and then it's up to you to carry the rest of it. FIORA has a really powerful mid game where you become simply unapproachable. Your enemies have to abandon your side of the map and try and get some stuff done elsewhere, or if they do try and stop you, you have all the tools you need to outplay them, even against all of the odds. The biggest tool is your riposte. This ability not only prevents you from being crowd control, but it also turns that CC around onto your enemies. So if you do master this ability, it can make you feel impossible to beat, especially in 1v1s and duels throughout the game. FIORA's team fighting is not her strongest attribute though. Split pushing, side lane, taking towers and taking enemy top laners hostage is what you do best. So when you do get that lead, this is how you want to abuse it in the majority of games. Now you can still team fight if you're just really strong and you can easily 1v5, or alternatively you can also look for flanks and clean up fights by diving into backlines. Your vitals and your ultimate allow you to do so much burst damage very quickly, and also if you do proc that ultimate you heal back up at the same time and live to fight another day. There's a lot to like about FIORA and loads of different ways you can carry with it, so if you do want to 1v9 this patch you can't really go wrong with it. Next up we've got CAMILLE.
I will wait for you to be better.
She shares a lot of the strengths that FIORA has, however she's more difficult to play and she can be punished a lot easier than FIORA too. CAMILLE does have some pretty unbelievable strengths though. For one, the burst and true damage on her Q is something that can always surprise your enemies. The sheer damage this ability deals is huge, and once you've got some AD and a Spellblade item, this slaps all types of targets. Yes, even the tanks. It almost feels like you're hitting them with a Cho'Gath ultimate every time you use your Q2. CAMILLE's playstyle is very similar to most top lane bruisers, like FIORA that we've already spoken about for example. You focus on creating a lead for yourself in the top lane, then becoming impossible to 1v1. If the enemy jungler comes up to try and overturn your lead and even out the playing field, you have all the tools in your arsenal to outplay them 1v2 and often kill one and get away free, kill both and trade, or just get away with your E without any risk. The dash range is so long, and this means you can often play pretty damn recklessly and get away with little risk. As the game progresses with CAMILLE you can carry in various ways. Her team fighting is surprisingly good for a split pushing bruiser, as her ultimate can allow you to just dive onto a carry and isolate them and burst them down easily. Oh, and they can't flash or dash away either, so they're just sat there hoping you don't one-shot them before they get any help. CAMILLE has an insanely high skill ceiling, so the possibilities are endless when it comes to outplaying your enemies in all sorts of drafts. She does have some pretty horrific matchups, but there are still ways to come out on top, and if you do get fed, well it's safe to say there's not going to be much your enemies will actually be able to do to beat you. Before we talk about our last top lane pick of this patch, there's a few champions we wanted to throw a quick mention to. The terrorizing tank shredders Darius and Olaf are still having a great time in the top lane because, well, let's be honest, they're already pretty damn busted and didn't get nerfed in this patch. Lots of players are experimenting with those new tanky mythic items, and this means these two guys are, well, still destroying them. Talking of tanks, Shen is still very much the best in the business, mainly because he's actually a bit of a hybrid. He's more of a tanky duelist split pusher rather than a team fighting CC machine. And then you've also got those other bruisers that are doing well too, like Riven and Jax. Our last champion to cover in the top lane though is actually going to be Singed.
How about a drink?
Now he is definitely different from those bruisers and Hydra abusers that we've already covered, and in a very different way he's just as strong. Singed has been a fantastic choice for quite a few patches now, and he's still thriving in this preseason patch so far. With Singed, you're not going to be constantly dueling and inviting 1v1s, but instead you just run your enemy around in circles, farm up without even thinking about it, and fling away any threats that try and stop you. You can be one of the hardest champions in that top lane to actually shut down, because every time your enemy tries to kill you, you just have the anti-mobility from your W, and of course the disengage from your fling. Now whether you get fed in the lane phase or not, it really doesn't matter. I mean, if you do get super fed, it's going to be an absolute breeze. You can just waltz around the lane spamming your love emote and dealing that glorious damage over time with your poisons until they're low enough for you to just go in and take them down. If your lane isn't going too well, you can just scale up into the late game, or you can just reset often, proxy waves and gank mid or bot when your ghost is up. Genuinely, if lanes don't have summoner spells, you can just sprint straight into them, fling them back into your team and carry the game this way instead. And guess what? This playstyle of charging in and flinging those carries is all you really need to do throughout the rest of the game too. Make sure your teammates are close enough to follow up and get stuck in and be an absolute nightmare for any backline that you come across. If you also have any supports or utility mages that can buff your movement speed, even better, because there's simply nothing they can do if you've got the right comp around you. Alright guys, well let's move into that jungle now, and first off we've got Wukong.
My journey's only beginning.
We all know just how strong the monkey was in the jungle last season, and then after a few too many nerfs he kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. Well then the preseason patch came along and buffed his jungle clear with the AoE damage that the new jungle Pokemon bring, and now he's top tier again. When Wukong can clear the jungle efficiently, he's just such a fantastic champion to play here. He brings excellent early ganks, solid skirmishing power and has a ton of mobility and damage too. Wukong's ultimate is also an amazing team fighting ability, so he's always got that in his pocket no matter how ahead or behind he gets. Wukong is also quite attractive to most players because he's quite simple to play. There's a fair few mechanics and tricks you can pull off after a bit of practice, but in general, most players can pick him up very easily, meaning he's a top pick to play across pretty much all ranks. Whether you farm up a bit in the early game or get stuck into ganks, it's not that hard to be impactful on him either, and if you do get fed, well, now you can just get around the map and really make your mark. One of the great things about Wukong at the moment though is just how strong his itemization is. Obviously you've got that new Ravenous Hydra, which is just pumping out ridiculous amounts of damage. But other items like Black Cleaver, more of my Mortius, Death's Dance and everything else are all still very solid item choices, and really good on this champion. Wukong is in such a good spot at the moment, with one of the highest win rates in the game across almost every single rank. So no matter what elo you are, you should definitely give him a go this patch. Next up, we've got the boy who shattered time himself, EKKO.
It's not how much time you have, it's how you use it.
Honestly, this is probably the best we've ever seen EKKO perform, especially so in recent seasons, and he's thriving so much more than you realise so far this patch. EKKO's early ganks aren't too bad and nor is his clear, but his snowball potential is unbelievable, and as long as you don't fall too far behind you can start to 1v9 super early on, with just 1 or 2 items. EKKO has so many fantastic qualities at the moment, but one of them is just how hard he is to actually shut down. And if you don't have too much CC and you don't time it properly, you're just never going to kill it. His ultimate is not only a huge source of damage in the right fights, but also pretty much a guaranteed get out of jail free card if he saves it and uses it just on the cusp of death. EKKO's ultimate also means he can dive through teams and get out afterwards and allows him to not even 1-for-1 when diving those carries. You can E, flash, rocket belt, Q auto and ult back out again after completely one-shotting an enemy carry. And guess what, you don't lose your life for it too. It really can be as simple as that. But one-shotting carries isn't quite where it ends for EKKO. He has loads of other reasons why he's so good, from incredible AoE damage, fantastic setup CC, he melts down objectives too, and he has solid map mobility. There's just so many good things about EKKO at the moment, and his ceiling is extremely high. So if you get practicing him now, he could be your new champion to play next season, and if he gets nerfed before then, well, enjoy the free elo for the time being. There's a few other junglers we also wanted to mention before we talk about our third champion in the jungle this patch. Hecarim is still incredibly scary and boasting one of the highest ban rates in the game, and if this pony gets fed early, well, he's very hard to shut down. Udyr is still doing Udyr things, running around the map deleting squishies and tanking a ton of damage. Master Yi is still as scary as ever if you don't have the crowd control to shut him down, and even Evelynn is up there with the big guns this preseason. Trust me, there is not much scarier than a good and fed Evelynn this patch. But our third jungle pick is a super aggressive, tower diving, snowballing, stomping AP powerhouse from the jungle. And yes, it's ELISE.
Pull the strings. Watch them dance.
Over the last few months, ELISE has just got better and better, and with all the crazy preseason chaos, she's actually been flying under the radar and just winning so many games. With ELISE, it's all about early aggression. You aren't going to be full clearing very often, and instead you're going to be wanting to gank and stomp lanes as early as possible. ELISE's cocoon is one of the main reasons her early ganks are so lethal, but then you got the mobility on her repel, her execute damage on her spider form Q, and just the sheer DPS from those spiderlings. That repel is definitely what allows her to be so aggressive though. This ability alone allows ELISE to die from as early as level 3 and really put her enemies behind with not too much risk. So instead of looking for lanes that are pushing to your own tower, look at those lanes that your enemies are under their own tower and trying to clear the wave so they can reset. Walk in, land your stun, pop them with some burst damage, turn into your spider and fly into the sky to drop all aggro and get away safely afterwards. Throughout games, ELISE just uses that early lead to walk around the map, creating picks with her stun and one-shotting anybody that she comes across. She definitely is no way near going to be as effective in the late game, so dominating the early to mid game is what you need to play around. But if you've got what it takes to really punish your enemies in the early game, stack up those dragons and take those plates, you're going to be winning so many games with ELISE this patch. Moving down to the mid lane now, and the first choice was incredibly easy, SYNDRA.
Let them try to stop me.
She is having the time of her life in that solo mid position at the moment and does not seem to be slowing down anytime soon. SYNDRA always used to be known for her insane level 6 and level 9 power spikes and how she had that 200 years ultimate that just auto won her the lane phase. She then snowballed and stomped or just fell off a cliff and didn't do as much in the late game. Well, it's safe to say that the tables have massively turned and now she's basically the opposite. Her new scaling, stacking passive means it's all about getting through the early game efficiently and scaling and spiking as early as you can to upgrade those abilities and get all of that bonus juicy ability power. Once you've stacked up your passive, you now have 2 Q charges, deal true damage with your W, your E is wide enough to hit 15 Gragas's in a row, and your ultimate is now genuinely a one-shot button. No, seriously, it executes past 15% health. So it basically means she can take down even the tankiest of enemies no problem. Late game SYNDRA is one of the scariest champions in the game to play against at the moment, and that's why she's so heavily contested and has a really high ban rate too. Whenever there's a pre-season shift in meta and items, for some reason this brings along the tendency for games to just naturally run longer. Players are throwing games left, right and centre and building all sorts of random items so those consistent late game monsters like SYNDRA just thrive. Yes, you have still got to be careful of those aggressive early game bruisers and assassins too, who can shut you down in the lane phase. But as long as you know how to chill out, farm up, stack that passive quicker and get those items, you can easily pop off and carry with SYNDRA this patch. Next up, we've got a surprising winner coming out of this preseason, Zed.
Balance is a fool's master.
Balanced is definitely not the word you can use to describe Zed right now, and his win rate is at an all-time high. Zed was one of the best mid lane choices before this preseason, and everyone kind of expected him to fall off a bit, but in fact he's actually doing even better now. Now, a large part of this is due to how powerful bruisers and assassins are, especially with the new Ravenous Hydra, and Zed is no exception to this. You have several mythic options to choose from. Prowler's Claw and Duskblade are both very popular, but it's Eclipse which wins out in most situations. Then you can build the new OP Hydra and the typical strong Zed items like Cyrilda's Grudge, Black Cleaver and Ghostblade. He has a pretty strong lane presence right from the start. He has good poke, fantastic burst, and he's fairly scary even in the early levels if he trades well. Zed has all the potential to kill you pre-6 without even needing his ultimate. He can hit you down with a few shurikens and that auto attack passive, and then just WEQ combo down with Ignite. When Zed does get his ultimate though, that's when he really does become even more lethal. It's probably one of the best dueling abilities you can actually go for in the mid lane because it just allows you to tower dive so easily. Press your ultimate, follow that with your W, your Q, your E, your auto attacks, build up a load of damage and watch them pop as you just press your ultimate again and get back to safety. Throughout the mid game, Zed just walks around snowballing, side laning and popping anyone down that tries to stop it. He can carry so easily by just diving into backlines and deleting the highest priority enemy target. And this doesn't really change that much as you go into the late game either. That's his real goal. He can either split push, take towers and kill anyone that tries to stop him, or just get away safely with his shadows. Or if he does decide to team fight, he can either dive through backlines with his ultimate, or he can just clean up and get some flanks off. Zed just has so much mobility that he actually can be quite hard to peel against too, unless you have some real reliable point and click CC. QSS, Cleanse doesn't really work against him, so the only thing you've got in your locker is a cheeky exhaust. But even then, is that really going to stop him? Probably not. Now before we get on to our third and final mid laner, there is still a few champions that are really good right now, but just didn't quite make the top 3. Anivia is as consistent as ever, and although she does take a little bit of practice to get used to those stuns and those walls, she's an absolutely fantastic pick if you can get it right. Vex is still able to dominate games from the mid lane with that sheer AoE damage potential and crowd control, along with those punishing ultimate resets too. And if you get the right matchup, Tristana is absolutely popping off in the mid lane at the moment, but not quite as much as Rumble.
Come on, I'm not even holding the controls.
Yes, Rumble is now actually one of the best mid laners in the game, and one of the biggest reasons why we all know that Rumble is doing so well all of a sudden is because he absolutely slaps melee mid laners. If you see someone with low range get picked in that mid lane and you pick Rumble, you're probably just going to walk all over them. You can burn them to smithereens when they try and get any kind of farm because you just press your Q and hover around them in your wave. You've got your W shield to get closer to them to use that flamethrower easier. You got your E slow as well, which adds to your poke damage. And once you've overheated with your Q up, well, you're going to deal some serious damage. Yes, Rumble is basically just picked because he's so damn good at punishing low range lanes. This has always kind of been what Rumble's known for, and right now this is more obvious than ever. Rumble is all about cancel countering and destroying certain matchups, and then just going around the map for the rest of the game, absolutely tearing through entire teams with his ultimate. Pop your ultimate down into a 5-stack team, flash in with your Q up and press Sonya's. This is one of the best ways to win games on Rumble because you just deal so much damage. And even if you die, you've probably taken a load of people down with you, or if not, just dealt a huge amount of damage. When playing Rumble, you've got a fair few build and rune options, but the main one revolves around Arcane Comet to add to your poke damage. You want to go for Resolve in your secondary rune tree to get that durability, and then when it comes to your items, you basically just want to get yourself a Night Harvester and a Shadow Flame. Just these two items alone will give you so much damage. And the movement speed you get from Night Harvester allows you to just chase and stick to your enemies with that flamethrower burning. After that, you basically just have a load of situational choices to go for. If you want more damage and penetration, you've got items like Raven's Death Cap and Void Staff. If you need the anti-heal, you can go for a Morello's. If you need a Zonya's, obviously you got that too. Or you can even go down the more defensive route and build some HP with a Demonic Embrace and a Rylai's. You can't really go too far wrong, and either way, whatever you build, you're going to do a hell of a lot of damage. So if you are looking for a new melee muncher in that mid lane, you can't go wrong with Rumble. Right, well that's the mid lane covered. Let's move down into the AD carry position now, and first of all, we're going to have to talk about Kai'Sa.
Are you the hunter
Or the prey.
Kai'Sa is one of the most popular and consistent AD carries in the entire game at the moment. She's got the highest number of games played for any single champion so far this preseason, with 50,000 more games played than the one underneath her. And it's quite understandable why she's so popular because she's a lot of fun and she just ticks so many boxes. In lane, you have that really good wave clear and poke with your Q. You have your W to poke and burst, especially alongside your passive. You've got that little bit of movement speed and attack speed with your E, and then once you get level 6 and get that ultimate, you can now dive, kite, or peel to your heart's content. Kai'Sa works so well with so many different supports too. If you partnered up with an aggressive, engaging tank with some CC, it can really work wonders alongside your passive, and you can really abuse this to actually get pretty fed in the early game. She also works really well with those sustaining supports like Soraka and Sona because she can just farm and scale up for free. And then of course, she also loves playing alongside an enchanter, because let's be honest, who doesn't love all the peel they provide? Kai'Sa really doesn't have too many bad matchups in the AD carry position either. There's always a way for her to get through that lane phase. I mean, sometimes she's not going to do as well as others. But the main thing is you scale into the late game like an absolute monster. So it doesn't really matter too much as long as you aren't just absolutely running it down. When you do get to that mid to late game though, this is when you really become online. Once you've evolved those abilities and you've got those main items like your Kraken Slayer, your Infinity Edge, your attack speed item, maybe even a collector if you're feeling a bit spicy. As soon as you've got all of this stuff, your damage is insane. Not only do you have a load of burst alongside your QW and your passive, but your autos obviously hurt too because let's be honest, you're an AD carry. And alongside your ultimate shield and mobility with your dash plus the stealth from your E, you can actually be really hard to take down too. One of the things about Kai'Sa too though is that if you do get fed early, it actually means you're far more scary than your typical AD carry in the same situation, because you become so much more lethal when you have upgraded those abilities. And the sooner you get those items, the sooner you can evolve them, and the next thing you know, you're 1v5ing. Talking of 1v5ing, the next AD carry we're going to speak about is Twitch.
Oh, yes, yes.
There are not many things in the game that are quite as scary as a good Twitch right now, and there's just so many ways to play and to build him. You can obviously go for the traditional AD carry setup, which focuses around Blade of the Ruin King and Kraken Slayer, and Lethal Tempo of course. Or you can go for Hail of Blades AP, which is all about dealing massive damage with your poisons. You get a Nash's Tooth, a Crown of the Shattered Queen, and then just more and more AP. And this one is actually the build that is having the most success at the moment. I mean, whichever build and whichever playstyle you go for, you're gonna be impactful. But the AP one is just so adept at melting through tanks, which let's be honest, so many people are playing. The early game is where you gotta be the most careful on Twitch though, because he is at his most vulnerable here. But the way you can bypass this is by actually playing a little bit sneaky and a little bit cheesy. Two of Twitch's favourite words that he lives by. What I mean by this is you don't just have to sit in lane, AFK farm and hope you don't get poked down. You can reset often and reset early and look to gank mid lane or assist your jungler around the map too. Because if you do get a few kills here and there across the map, you can bring them back to your bot lane, you can get your ultimate and you can just press R, alter them a few times and then press E and they're probably going to be dead. There are not many AD carries in the game that can just walk into a whole team, get behind them, press their ultimate and absolutely melt them. And if you do love flanking and cleaning up fights and being a little bit stealthy and a little bit cheeky, well, Twitch is definitely the champion you should be playing right now. His unique playstyle is undeniably effective. So if you haven't tried it yet, give it a go. Before we get onto our third and final AD carry to play in this patch, we have a few honourable mentions. Caitlyn is winning a lot of lanes at the moment. I mean, this isn't too uncommon, but right now she's at her peak. Jhin is still Mr. Consistent. He's such a good pick into so many different games and he's still having a really good time. And if you do pick her in the right matchup, Neela is a really good pocket pick to play as well. But as you'd expect, they just don't come out on top of DRAVEN.
Got axes, need victims.
Yes, this snowballing pub stomping powerhouse is still as strong as ever. And especially so at those higher ranks, people are still completely and utterly abusing this champion. Now, if you aren't an aggressive player, then DRAVEN probably isn't for you. But if you like obliterating lanes before the 15-minute mark, then you need to play this champion, as long as you have the mechanics to pull him off. Maintaining those axes is crucial to playing this champion. So you are going to need to know how to attack move properly and how to auto space correctly too, to actually be able to play this champion properly. And if you can learn him and master him well, you're going to be rewarded in pools of elo. In the early game, you can be as aggressive as you want, because once you get a kill or two, especially alongside the gold generation from your passive, well, you're going to have 2 items before the 10-minute mark. There is no other AD carry that can get as fed as quickly as DRAVEN. And if you do get a lead in the early game, it's very hard to lose it, especially when you put it down to 2v2s. With DRAVEN, you can play those really aggressive supports and look to really get fed in the early game like Leona DRAVEN or Nautilus DRAVEN, but you can also just play Enchanters and let him do his thing. If you're playing DRAVEN and your NAMI ease you or your JANNA shields you, well, you're going to deal even more damage. So what's not to like about that, right? The thing about DRAVEN though is you get so fed in the early to mid game that when people come to try and stop you and shut you down, you just kill them instead. It really is that simple. No one can come near that bot side of the map without you just one-shotting them, which in turn means you're going to get every single dragon and you're probably going to force a surrender vote. DRAVEN does take quite a lot of skill, so you are going to need to put a little bit of practice on him before you can start blind picking it. But the good thing about it is when you do get good enough, well, you can just play this champion until you retire. If you're not ready to retire though, you could just main support. So on that note, let's take a look at our top 3 supports you can play this patch. Starting off with the one, the only JANNA.
The storm approaches.
Yes, JANNA is still one of the best supports and best champions in the entire game, and her win rate is a little bit bonkers. You can basically play this champion at any rank and always do well, and no one's going to complain having a JANNA on their team either. The sheer amount of utility that she offers from as early as the lane phase to those big late game team fights is pretty much unrivaled at the moment. You've got slows, you've got shields, you've got those tornadoes to set up fights or disengage, you've got your ultimate and healing and disengage and everything else that comes along with it. Plus a pocket full of items to help buff and boost your teammates and protect them and keep them alive too. So basically JANNA is just everything you want from a support. In the lane phase you can choose to be as aggressive or just as passive as you want really, and that kind of largely depends on your matchup and of course your AD carry alongside you. If you want to be aggressive you can look to spam your W on your enemy, you can harass them with auto attacks and you can send out tornadoes pretty damn often. Or if you do need to be a bit more defensive if you're against a threatening lane, just make sure you keep that tornado in your pocket. Make sure you're always thinking about that shield and putting it on your AD carry to not only prevent them from getting damaged but also to benefit them and give them more AD too. Your ultimate is really where you become far more complete though. This now makes your 2v2 potential, your 2v3 potential and anything else, any kind of team fight, any kind of dragon fight so much stronger. It's not only fantastic for its AoE disengage, but that healing is pretty insane too. Then when it comes to team fights, it's all about just spamming as much utility as you can. If you have a really fed teammate, you want to play alongside them, you want to peel for them as much as you can with your tornadoes, your slows and your ultimate, but also spam that shield on them as often as you can. And don't forget about those summoner spells, those item actives and everything else to go along with it. Because if you keep that really fed AD carry alive, well, you're probably going to win the game on this alone. Next up, we've got NAMI.
Afraid to get your feet wet?
And we've just spoken about a champion that really has it all, but there's one thing that NAMI has that JANNA doesn't, which is sustain. NAMI's peel and protection might not be quite as reliable as JANNA's, but she offers that in-lane sustain with her W and also contributes way more damage with her E, both of which make her an absolute nightmare to lane against, especially so in certain matchups. NAMI's E contributes so much damage, and if you play it alongside aggressive AD carries that can really abuse this with their burst damage which is high enough already, well, you've got a match made in heaven. And this is why Lucian NAMI is still one of the best lanes in the game. Lucian really isn't that great at the moment, but NAMI makes him S+ tier. It's really that simple. NAMI's E really is one of the main reasons why she's just so broken. It just offers so much burst damage in the lane phase, and often you can just get so fed in those 2v2s and just roll over the game. Alongside that E though, you also have a lot to offer. You've got the crowd control from your ultimate and your bubble, you've got the healing from your W as well, and also the movement speed you grant to your teammates whenever you cast a spell on them. The early game is fairly similar to JANNA. You can play really aggressive and look to get kills, or you can just sit back, heal your AD carry up and just chill out and wait for the mid game. But to be honest, the only reason you wouldn't be playing aggressive in the early game is if you have a very passive AD carry alongside you, because in most lanes alongside NAMI like Brand, Lucian, DRAVEN, Samira, you can just get so fed. Then as the game progresses, it's all about just spamming your utility. Keep your AD carry and the rest of your teammates really nice and healthy with your W's healing. Whenever your allies are fighting, just make sure you got that E on them, and aside from that, try and land those bubbles and those tidal waves and win the game with your crowd control. NAMI is definitely one of the more versatile jack of all trades supports you can go for at the moment, and her win rate is very, very high. So if you want someone quite flexible, quite consistent, but someone that offers a lot of damage too, go for NAMI. So there's quite a few support champions doing really well at the moment. You've got those sustaining champions like Soraka and Sona, you've got Zillion who's always been good, and you've also got Renata Glask with that unique utility kit that she offers. But the support that's actually performing better than all of these is TARIC.
Gems always hold their edge.
He starts off pretty threatening in the early lane phase. Now he's not quite as scary as early game champions like Nautilus and Pyke, but don't underestimate the value and the strength of that flash stun combo. Alongside this stun, he also brings a load of healing, good resistances, and then of course that massive ultimate, which can really make the difference in 2v2s, team fights, dragon fights, you name it. It's so much better than people give it credit for. TARIC's somewhat tanky itemization also comes in handy too. He's not the easiest to kill, so it means it's a bit more forgiving to actually get that utility off without just getting one shot when you get caught out of position. TARIC just works with so many different AD carries. My personal favourite one is to partner it up with Kalista, because if Kalista wasn't already super difficult to actually take down with all of her mobility and her ultimate, well now it's even harder because that TARIC ultimate just makes her even more immortal. In team fights you want to try and auto attack as much as you can so you can spam those heals, spam those other abilities to keep those stuns going on as many enemies as possible and dish out tons of utility with your summoner spells, your ultimate, your item actives and everything else that comes along with it. If you can make use of all of those things that TARIC has to offer, you'll quickly realise just how good he can be. That's going to bring us to the end of our best champions for every role that you can play so far this preseason. Don't forget to click the link in the description and download our brand new free app that you can use to help you win more games in League of Legends. There's so much free content there that you just don't want to miss out on. Thanks everyone for watching and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.